Okay, so no, we're talking. This is us. We struggled last week. Things have been happening, but we're back. And as it should be, I have no idea what you're wanting to do today, which I'm looking forward to because I think you said you have something that we're going to change up on.
Uh, yes, I actually changed directions. I want to ask you. Uh, it's a new year is coming, and we
Mm.
are all so good at resolutions. So we keep making resolutions.
hmm
Why we keep making resolutions, right?
Well, because we realize there are things we want to change in our lives. So I think what we realize is we come to the end of the year, there's the sort of new year, fresh start, start line kind of mentality. I mean, as days roll by, but we have this construct in our thinking that means if it's a new year, it's a fresh start, and we love a fresh start. So I think, in fact, one of the things that I think is one of the main reasons is because we oftentimes have a perfectionist mindset when it comes to making a change or pursuing a goal. The idea is that I need a clean slate, I need a fresh start, and then I need to follow it perfectly, which is why when we're possibly, sort of motivated for a new start and thinking about things possibly on a little bit of a holiday and thinking, I'm really going to make a change this year, and then it comes to the new year and we start. And I think all of us know that whether it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or, maybe a little longer than that, we're normally back into the grind and back into the busyness of
So why is that?
life.
So what happens?
I think the reality is, again, we set ourselves up for failure in many ways unintentionally by assuming a fresh start is needed. Number one, that's not true. Now is as good a time as any. The second thing is it has to be followed perfectly, as opposed to recognizing that the pursuit of any goal involves a fair amount of falling. But the idea is when you fall, stand up, dust yourself off, learn, and keep going. So we lose momentum very easily. And oftentimes, again, just the enthusiasm of a possible fresh start and change gives us a sense of motivation that we end up, biting off more than we can chew.
But
So,
I'm just going to cut in. I have a feeling there's some level of delusion that the new year means new us. But we are
certainly
carrying
possible.
everything that influenced that year into
Yeah.
the new year. So all the resources, all the skills, all the mindset somehow magically will do something
Yeah.
else on the
That's,
1st of
that's what a
January
reset is. That's what a fresh start assumes. And the simple reality is it doesn't work like that.
because we are literally walking in with this without the upgrade really in any of the toolkit that we should be using
Yeah.
anytime. This is what you said. Now is as good as
Now's as
1st of
good as
January.
any. Yeah. Because remember, if you start off in pursuit of something and the assumption is a fresh start means I'm not having to be confronted with my failures necessarily, I almost get the sense of a new beginning. That again is tremendously refreshing and motivating. The problem is nothing else has
It's
really
delayed as
changed.
well. It's nice.
As I said, it's a construct. The days roll into the days. The fact that we have a calendar gives us some sort of structure. It doesn't alter us day to day, exactly to your point. So I think that the reality is if we would like to make a change, we probably could use New Year as an opportunity, as a mark, but I don't think we need to wait till that.
So how do we do it better? I think there's an obviously it's tapping into desire to do things better. Clearly, we
Yeah,
have a
we
knowledge
want
and
something better.
understanding that there is better, and
Yes.
there's something we are comparing to that feels we should go toward a change in that direction. So how can we do it better?
I think that we go back to that success equation that I refer to very often, which is all success is the result of a few good decisions and a lot of perseverance. And then we look at that and we say, well, the few good decisions relate to an understanding of what's needed to get me to my goal, which is the sort of the end point. And the few good decisions define the plan, which means I probably need to know myself well. I need to know what's required to get there. I probably need to know what's required in terms of the actions and the costs involved. And then when I've established I have enough to make a few good decisions in terms of I'm going to commit to either establishing a routine or something that is actually manageable, then the perseverance component is now I need to establish how do I exercise the self control to follow through with my plan when life starts hitting back at me. So, how do we do it better? I think we establish we need to really define what it is that we're looking for. Lots of people have established that in terms of how to set goals, but we need to recognize that it's going to probably come at a cost that we might not be ready for. And if we want what we want seriously or badly enough, then the commitment in terms of developing the skills of self control, which we've discussed many times, would relate not to the achievement of the goal as the motivation, but to link the actual requirements to other motivating factors in us. And I say it repeatedly in relation to our identity and our values and our relationships and responsibilities. If we can find different motivational drivers to keep pushing us through, to follow through with those few good decisions, what we'll find is we become goal getters. In other words, we actually start succeeding substantially better than what we ordinarily do, sort of wishful thinking.
So let's go back to that list. Is that sequence or is that happening at the same time?
Which
Self-awareness and then, you know, self-control and then knowing the goal, what you want, and then in that area, what
if I
resources I
were,
need. And so that sounds like a lot of territory to cover.
yeah, and again, it depends on the goal because not every goal is
Okay,
equally
so
complicated.
let's
So pick a
let,
goal for me. What would you
let's
like to do in the new year?
in the new year. I don't have anything specifically ambitious that I can point at.
So what do
Um,
most people want?
Okay, in my case, I really want to have more fun, so which is not really so it's a
Okay,
strange
so let's take it.
resolution.
No, and in many respects, I mean, that ties in beautifully with every
But
single
I can throw
person's.
you someone else's resolution that someone actually
Let's
asked me
work on
about.
yours first and then we'll
Okay,
look at the
cool.
others. So I want to have more fun. So in a situation, if I was sitting with you right now and saying, okay, so you've got this plan. First of all, it's somewhat ambiguous. It's more and it's fun. And that's
Well,
very
I think
broad
I'm
too.
unfair. I actually already having fun. I want consistency of the same fun, and I kind of want to add on to it. So and find the right people that I can do. I see it's more finding the right tribe. So it's
Okay,
I know
so
already what I want, and more finding people that I can do that with, because I realize I do enjoy. You know, while I do some of the things alone, I find really nice when I go with someone. I just find it
so
more enjoyable.
immediately there are a couple of things that come to my mind. The first one would be whatever it is in the first week or 10 days that you plan to have fun and you're possibly going to go on your own, go. And what you might find is the people who are there become the kind of people who may well be tribe worthy.
Depends on the event.
That's what I'm saying. The probabilities, if you're going to the same kind of thing, there is at least something in common. Now, that's not going to be applicable all the time, but you may well find that just being friendly, which I know you can be, right, in a setting where there is some sense of agreement in terms of what's fun, you might well meet people, and being open to meet people. The few good decisions would relate to I need to be open when I'm there to meeting people, engaging, and then see where that goes. Obviously, with care and caution, and hopefully a sense
Yeah,
of
the things I go to, I think care and caution is much. There's a free flowing alcohol. Anyway, can I? So this is not very
that's a
of
good time to
substance
tell.
for anyone's life, but
Hmm,
um, can I put forward something that someone asked me?
sure.
I feel lost. I would like to find myself. I want to be authentic self, and I found that
Okay. I
quite a
like that.
mouthful. And she wants to dedicate. I mean, there was just a timeline that felt as a more applicable to the goal. So I want to give myself, find myself, and I want to give myself a year.
Hmm.
Okay. So I want to dedicate this year to myself. I find that, so where would one start with kind of, I want to be more authentic self. I want to know what I want and I want to know how do I do that. And while I'm in a relationship, long-term relationship,
So it'll be interesting to know how old is this person?
moving into 50.
So the person's moving into 50. By that stage, you think you have a fair idea of who you are. We would think ordinarily. But
Well,
in that,
I can add why not. Should I
sure.
build on this?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. As a parent, this is the so you so this is a actually empty nester now.
Hmm.
So the children who are defining a lot of time and commitment and to do list is now are gone. So there was a significant delay what I want simply because there was a huge engagement with others want. So
Yes.
primarily
Hugely
children.
self sacrificial.
Yes. And so
Mom, yeah.
now
Well, my
unfortunately
turn.
no, it's my turn. What do I do with this my turn
So
now?
again, the reason I ask on the sort of for those sort of details, because principally the things remain the same, but you can be a bit more precise when you're dealing with
True,
some of
true.
those details. So you're dealing with somebody who's going through what you've just described. The whole sort of role of life is changing.
Absolutely.
Functionally, physiologically, life is changing. Oftentimes people arrive at that particular point in time and life hasn't gone the way that they expected. So often these things are all coming together to give the way you sort of led in and said the person's feeling somewhat lost. Well, what they're saying is, I think in order to establish where I am, I need to establish who I am, what I am, so that I can then from there determine where I'm going.
So let's start with who I am. What are the
So,
questions? And this is DIY, right? So I'm doing it myself. So I'm not going to
yes,
consult and I'm not going
right.
to anyone else. So let's say I use this video to guide me
Okay, so
where to
that's
start.
cool. So what I would say to you is one of the things that I'm definitely going to be doing, and I'm just quickly go on a sort of a sidetrack here to come back to that, is what I came to realize with Perspective for Life in the last sort of 10 days is with all the things that I've been working together, Perspective for Life is actually a transformation system. And the four main components would relate to making sense of me, developing super self-control, becoming a goal getter, and then learning to live in the
So
present.
is that sequence
So
again?
that's a sequence to a
Okay.
large degree, which is why I'm going in and saying, I think the way the person's chosen to try and establish this, they've chosen the right place to begin.
Yeah, exactly.
Because genuinely knowing yourself, as I mentioned earlier, the person who is successful in pursuing their goals is a person who has a good idea of who they are and that they can lean on very strongly to drive the day-to-day behaviors that bring about the changes and the success that they're looking for. So when I look at the mind map and it comes to the sort of what makes full satisfaction, there are a couple of things there. And the one is relating to physical sensory satisfaction. The other one relates to sort of this value, conscience, morality section. Then there's the section on identity, then relationships, and then resources. So
So you
those are the
explore,
five.
you want to
That's
explore.
exactly. So when you use that in many ways as a pattern to say, what do I know about myself? If these are the things that make me satisfied, or these are the areas I find satisfaction, let me start with something as simple as what are the sensory things that I currently enjoy? What are the
Are
sensory
you looking
things?
which one carries more gravity,
To
takes
start with, I'd
more, or
say just simply gather the pieces.
okay,
So
let's gather the
yeah.
pieces.
So the gathering the pieces, I would say to somebody, and this I might do with a 13-year-old or a 50-year-old, say,
Sure.
what kind of music do you like? What kind of clothes do you like to wear? What kind of things do you like to look at?
All
What
right, we
sort
can
of
answer
programs?
this. Let's play this
Yeah,
one.
let's go for it.
Let's play. Okay.
So what kind of
Um,
music do you like?
pop.
Okay. What sort of things do you like to watch?
Netflix series, drama, rom-com.
Clothes wise, what do you find nice?
Okay, so I'm imagining now. Elegant
Person's not
feminine.
you, by the way. I'm
No,
just
it's not
teasing.
me.
I'm
No,
teasing.
no,
No,
no.
just
That's why
kidding. No, just for
that's
a
what I'm.
friend.
That's what I'm thinking.
Sure,
Well,
right.
it's not. No, I'm not going to even decide. I
No,
mean,
I'm
it
teasing.
doesn't matter
Teasing.
because we are now really building up how would this simulate. We're simulating anyway. So, elegant, feminine, and but I do enjoy at home, really relaxed kind of clothes. I don't
Food?
food spicy.
Okay.
Going out,
Rest and relaxation. What does that look like? What do you enjoy?
being outdoor,
Okay.
walking,
So now
water, a
watch.
beach.
Okay. So watch now. So we start here. I mentioned five, but if we just started there
Mm-hmm.
and the person's goal is to get to know myself and be my authentic self, the only time we ever have conflict with any other person is when we have a disagreement or difference of opinion. What kinds of things can we have a difference of opinion on? Music, food, clothes, what to watch. So
With who?
with anybody. Now
Oh,
here's
okay.
the point. If you want to be your authentic self, ordinarily people in relationship and in social settings want to be accepted. And we know that in order to fit in, we need to be agreeable, which means that oftentimes people don't know who they are because they're trying so hard to be something that they're not in relation
They think
to the,
society rewards more?
absolutely, in relation
Okay.
to everyday kinds of things. So what kind of food do you like? Spicy food. Oh, I really want to get to know this person. I don't really like spicy food. I also love spicy food.
Okay.
Eventually, over time and over weeks and months and years, you actually don't have a clue anymore. Do I like eggs? Do I not like eggs? What kind of eggs do I like?
Okay, in this case, the person is confident
Fine. So we look
and
at it
they
and we
don't need the
say,
company either.
great. So, and Here's the point. Are they comfortable eating and ordering and dressing and doing the things?
Absolutely. That's,
Fantastic.
yeah.
So here's my point. How well do you know yourself in that area? Very well. Can you live it out very well? Yes. So check.
Tick. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So
Moving on.
moving on. So in the section, every person is wired in pursuit of maximal satisfaction, governed by a conscience system. In other words, a morality system. And the way it works is simply I when I act or live and think in line with or consistently with what I think is right and fair, and I avoid doing things that I think are wrong and unfair, I typically find satisfaction in the integrity and consistency of who I am in relation to my beliefs and values. So I would ask the question in that particular case, how often does this person feel guilty?
Often.
And here's what we look at. So what we know is if a person's feeling guilty often, they are crossing their moral line regularly. So what's the deal? They are not acting consistently with what they
Well,
say
let's
they
explore the
believe.
guilt.
Absolutely. So in that situation, this becomes a very helpful one because if I want to understand my values, which is what we said form a vital component of what stabilizes my commitment to doing what's required when I feel like it or not. Okay. In other words, what's required to exercise self control. If I find myself deviating regularly from the things that I believe are right and the things that I believe are fair, and I'm finding guilt, guilt is the marker. Guilt never presents itself unless I've crossed my moral line. So if I'm acting
Oh,
consistently,
expectations from self. Yeah.
the bottom line is guilt is
Sure.
only ever an experience
You're
of
not aligned in
crossing.
alignment.
In other
Yes.
words, again, there is that conflict. So if I'm consistently or regularly feeling guilty, it tells me I'm regularly acting inconsistently with who I
Could
say
be
I am.
imaginary.
Okay, so now here's the point. We haven't established what are you guilty of yet.
Exactly. So
So
let's,
I'm saying to you, here the person thinks enough, believes enough to be doing things that give them a sense of guilt. The sense of guilt indicates they are doing something that, from their perspective, is wrong and not fair. So, again, we say, well, when we act inconsistently, we typically don't expect that from ourselves, which leaves us with that negative emotion and lots of question marks. Well, you're starting to see a very, very good indication as to why a person finds themselves lost. Why? Because I think I'm this person. I say I believe these things. And yet I find regularly in my life, I'm crossing that line, deviating. The mind, the thinking, the brain in that situation is having to reconcile this all the time. And eventually it's like, well, I don't know anymore.
okay. So let's explore this in more specifics. I can give you a little bit
Give me a
more.
good example.
Okay.
Right.
So the person finds that to give themselves a year,
Mm.
they will need to take time for themselves and do
Yes.
things exclusively for themselves,
Yes.
which actually is not in line with what their prime role is a take care. So all
Right.
the time understanding other people's needs, finding great pleasure in pleasing others, taking care of them, which reflected quite strongly in being a parent now that the person is not the parent,
Right.
and the adult in the house, which is a husband, doesn't require that level of care. But now I'm attached to that identity, or at least that's what I
Now watch what you went to. You immediately went over to identity. And that's interesting
exactly. So this
because,
person actually would have that. I feel guilty because I find this selfish.
right.
So the
So,
morality comes by the labeling, doing something
correct.
for
Yes.
myself without taking care of anyone else
Correct.
in
And
some way impinges on my capacity to take care. So me taking care of myself is actually selfish. Thus, that's morally corrupted. That
yes.
so I shouldn't be. But I want.
Exactly. So the person is conflicted. Well, when a person is conflicted repeatedly over time and vacillating from one to the other, that person ends up lost and aimless. So this makes
Well,
sense.
they're paralyzed.
Well,
They
either
they
stuck,
want, but they don't want.
either
They
stuck.
want, but
Right.
they don't make the call. So it's a
Exactly.
constant.
Yeah. So either stuck or aimless in many respects, and just a sense of they're not grounded. They're not grounded because they don't have what is supposed to guide them. So let's tie it. Very often, when there is a sense of identity that relates to roles and character and responsibilities and a purpose, that's very strongly tied to that moral sense of value that if, for example, I've been the mother, I've been the homemaker, I've been all the things that have been massively sacrificial. In other words, I give my time, my energy, myself in all of these forms continually in service to somebody else. And the dynamic has now changed. My identity is I am a giver and I'm a giver for a reason. And the reason is I am the mom and the caretaker, as you've said. Not the best choice of words from my side, but caretaker, but I am the care. I'm one who takes care. Now I sit with the conflict. If I am to give time to myself, energy to myself, attention to myself, any of these things, the reason that seemingly is contradictory is because that would be termed, as you pointed out, selfish. Well, here's the question. Is taking care of yourself in this new phase of life genuinely selfish? So as I mentioned earlier, the person believes so because otherwise they wouldn't be feeling guilty. So the question is, what is informing the conscience? What is informing the sense of morality and the sense of violation? Now, if I said, well, that person has worked to the point where they have sacrificially given and given and given, and they have completed a certain amount of that giving task, and they find themselves now in a transition phase of life where the demands are no longer what they used to be. Now, she might have to deal with the identity loss there, but there is then the freedom to say, well, I do come to a time where there is a change in my life where to actually have the freedom to not necessarily selfishly take care of myself, but have the opportunity to refresh, regroup, sort of, restart. This is where the individual is almost going with a New Year resolution, and to give myself time that is not at the expense of time and energy and myself given to something else. I'm not taking from anybody else to give to myself. That is selfish.
Okay, so there is a point of taking,
Well,
which
no,
is
there's a
financial.
point of view.
That those
Okay.
things have to be paid by someone who works, you don't.
So the question there would be
Should I
if
be
that,
spending money
right.
that I don't earn and then I spend only on myself and the other person is not in any way involved?
Well, here would be my take on that. The first thing is, have you spoken to the other person? The first thing is you sit down because the probability is the other person, if they are still together, is looking at it and saying, hey, you've earned this. And I'd be delighted for you to go ahead and take some time because you've been serving in a particular area in the home. I've been earning money. Both of us have been working. One is being paid for it, the other hasn't. So the idea of who's being paid what, if we're together, in my mind, it's you've served in areas that I couldn't serve, and you've earned certain things that I benefit from, and vice versa. So there is a shared resource.
How about emotional maturity that adds? What kind
Well,
of
that's
partner can I get if I become? What partner do I become if I
so
actually
now
explore
watch.
my wants?
So I wasn't quite finished on this
That
section there. The idea is I've discussed it with the other person, and the probability is the other person is within reason going to say, no, I want you to do that. Now the question is, if the other person is giving that to me, how could I use what's being given to genuinely feel better, feel more refreshed, and reciprocate?
mm-hmm,
Well,
mm-hmm.
if you go and
Which would
take care
remove
of
the moral
yourself,
conflict a lot.
right, exactly. So we're trying to recalibrate the perspective on the morality here or the identity conflict, which is you are no longer fulfilling the particular role and responsibility that you had before. That's part of life. There is a transition phase there. You still have the partner who, in all probability, you may well have neglected for the past 25 years as you've been taking care of other things. If that relationship is a good relationship and one that could be better, I would say take the time, refresh yourself, take care of yourself on the things that you enjoy, that there is a sense of happiness and satisfaction that will spill over into your home and provide possibly an easier relationship, a more agreeable relationship, a more focused relationship. I went out today. I had such a wonderful time. I'd love for us to be able to do that together. Well, how are you going to know if you didn't go out and explore that? So I think that as the person is able to refresh and, sort of rejuvenate and enjoy things that they've been holding off for, if the mindset is, I'm going to do that, it's good for me, and that by being good for me is going to be good for my partner. And when the family does come around or when things do happen, I can still go ahead and be the one who is the caregiver and be mom. But now it's not on the sort of full-time basis. It doesn't mean I'm any less those things. It just means I'm not in that role as consistently that requires the things that would have required before. So I recalibrate. So part of what I say in all of these things is perspective is everything. So by adjusting the perspective, not to reframe it to say, I'm now going to be selfish, which is what many people have to try and do in that situation, convince themselves that the things that I'm doing are selfish. I am now going to be
I
selfish.
deserve
I've
to be.
earned it. That person is going to be so conflicted because it's a violation of their identity. What they're looking for is to do something that could be good for them, which in all probability, if they recognize, is good for you and is not selfish, but taking care of self so that you can then have more to give of self, maybe now focused in your marriage relationship or in that particular area or something else. What you realize is the refreshment and the rejuvenation can now be utilized to channel what you're giving in a slightly, more targeted way that relates to my new sort of stage and transition of life. So as we looking to say, I'm trying to understand who I am and be my authentic self means I act in line with what I believe is right and fair. Contradictory, hypocritical self is I say this is right and fair and I act in this particular way and my reward is guilt because the guilt is supposed to tell me you're not being consistent. You're not doing what's right. It's supposed to be a warning bell or a warning sort of signal that says you need to get back in line. Well, now things have changed. I get to adjust my view of my role and my responsibility, and I get to enjoy and give in a whole different way. And I'm receiving in order to do that. I'm receiving the financial resources in order to do that. Again, any good relationship is not two-phase. It's not give and take. We've said this many times. Better together means I give, it's received, and there is some appreciation and reciprocation. The thing that is being received in terms of the finances to go ahead and whatever that means, take up an art class or go and wear the clothes that I like or go to a concert that I like or whatever it is that related to sensory or identity or whatever else it is. I've mentioned small things, but whatever it is that's a part of that goal, can I use that, enjoy, experience a level of satisfaction and happiness that I really, really, it just makes me feel good. And I take that feeling and that re energized state and I send it right back to the one who's kindly given me the opportunity. So you realize it's a seemingly simple question that because of the way in which it's so intricately connected with other people and with other things, it's important to see how that interaction needs to be understood. So telling a person who's been selfless all their lives to become selfish, or giving them the sense that in order to enjoy something, I'm going to have to be selfish, that contradiction will basically not allow them to enjoy what they're doing. They basically will feel guilty and all of these kinds of things. Again, I like to say restructuring the perspective rather than reframing. Restructuring the perspective, the view on self gives me a sense of, I'm starting to find that this is who I am at this stage of life. And to act like this, which might be different from the way I acted before, is actually now consistent with this stage of life. And this is the value that it gives to me and the people around me. That's a wonderful thing.
So we said four sources of that you go through of the so it was sensory,
Yeah.
it was morality, it was identity,
Identity,
and
relationship, and resources. So 5,
that's
right?
five.
So we're looking at that and saying you could see how one can work through that um, sort of moral conscience side and use guilt as a marker for what are all the areas I feel guilty in. So the person, again, this is still, we're putting the pieces on the table. I know what music I like. I know what food I like. I know what clothes I like. Now I get a sense of I know what, when I feel guilty. And I feel guilty when I do this, when I do that, when I don't do the other. And I sort of piece that together. I'm getting a sense of who I am, who I say I am, who I really am, because I believe we say what we know, we do what we believe, right? Maybe this is I need to sit down and reassess what is it that I actually believe in terms of my values, etc.
Okay, so I'm gonna interject something there. Looking at some of the traditional approaches, and I know myself when I listen to some of the podcasts on psychotherapy. So now the first question is, where did you learn this? And then so we kind of delay, now and here by going back to past, looking at our
Yeah.
parents and traumas and So I know you and I discussed this already. So I know you have a stand on this
Yeah.
of how valuable and where does the value really limits itself here. So we're not saying it's not valuable to know the past.
Yeah.
The question is, should we rely, fully on understanding and what happened when I was
So
young?
let me take it like this. This person that we're using as the example,
Mhm.
that person might well be in this pursuit of now trying to establish who they are and finding themselves in order to
And
be
they
more
have.
authentic
So
self.
this person actually looked at the past
Yeah.
and they found
But
that
here's what I'm
there
saying.
were traumas, and
That
then
person might be guided by a therapist or a friend or anybody else. As you said, they were looking to do this on their own, but that would be typically, well, where did these things come from, as you've rightly pointed? My take on this is quite simple. The past has a massive influence on our perspective and how we process life. Well, that's part of how we learn.
exactly.
The question is less about where does what I believe come from? And the question is what I believe realistic and in line with factual reality and true? In other words, I use the example, silly one, but I say, well, when I was 3 or 4, I might have believed in a Father Christmas or a tooth fairy, right? At some point in time, I came to realize that that isn't reality. It served me in a way at a particular point in time. It added value to my life and my imagination and all of these kinds of things. But at some point, I realized my childish belief, which is what it was, has no role in my current understanding of the world and my perspective, and as I construct and relate that to reality. Well, if we're in a situation now at 50 and I'm having to go back to the past, again, I don't know that what you're going to remember is accurate, right? So the memory is fallible. So you think you remember it well, but you probably don't. So that's not going to be particularly helpful. When it was recalled, or when it was lived in the past, it was lived with probably a very small perspective and level of understanding, which means that what was constructed was probably overly simple or simplistic and served a purpose that no longer is helpful. So I don't think we do enough to reassess our own beliefs about life as we continue on in life. We assume because something worked for me or it made sense, now I embrace it as my own, and because it's my own, it must be right. We tend to do that. We tend to hold to our own beliefs as being accurate because they're ours. This is where on the mind map here, the legitimate distrust of self comes in. So again, sitting with that person, if I was sitting with them, I'd say, what is the belief you have is way more important than where it came from. Way more important.
Because you're making decisions right now
Because if you're going
based
to
on that.
say it came from there, my question is, can it change? Because sometimes people will say, well, it's so rooted in the past, I'm never going to change. Well, that's hopeless.
But I find it finding someone or displacement of into the past that allows me not to feel guilty.
Here's the
It's a
point.
relief. Like it was not me. I didn't make this happen. It was like
And here's the point. How's it serving you right now?
I just don't know how. I mean, my question is, okay, so what now? So
Here's
what?
the point.
Okay, great. So you found something in the past, and how is that right now translating to anything different than before? What this apart from relief,
Yeah.
which lots of people just makes sense, and now it makes sense. Like quite often we would say, it makes sense now.
And here's the point. I've got no problem with that. There are times when it's wonderful. I get where that came from. So that's nice. But here's the point. It's not essential to make a change. I am looking at making a change here. I don't need to know where something came from. I need to know, can I accurately identify what I believe? And then can I reasonably assess that and really poke at that belief to establish, is it valid or not? Because that is what we're looking for. If we're looking to say that as I navigate life, my perspective needs to be as closely aligned with reality as possible. In other words, the way in which I process everything, my perspective is how I overlay everything I'm seeing. So I see everything through this lens. The question is the lens nicely calibrated and aligned with what's factually accurate? And if I learned something in the past and, it was incomplete or it was inaccurate or there was some sort of attribution error, well, the probability is if I'm clinging to it, it's still inaccurate today. So I come back to the point. It's interesting to go back to the past. Fine. Is it helpful? I will say to you, first of all, you can't go back and undo it. That's actually the second thing. The first thing I said is you're not going to remember it particularly accurately. Second thing is you can't go back and do anything about it. So my take is very simply this: is there something you can learn from the past? Well, I can learn that that which worked for me then as a child or as a teenager was something that served a particular purpose that no longer has a particular role and a place. Why? It's not accurate. It's not correct. Therefore, am I willing to be humble enough to say, I probably need to change something I've held for 45 years,
There goes the resolution.
right? Right. So, in the situation, what we're looking at is, again, we've taken a concept of why do we fail at, sort of New Year's resolutions, and we've taken it to one that is actually really, really a nice one. I like the example. And we've said, how would a person go and start unpacking that? My approach as I'm laying out here is find the areas of satisfaction. I think we'll leave it at that. We can unpack it further, but you get the idea of what one's doing. One then would apply that again to relationships, to resources of how do I use my time, my energy, my potential. And then I would take it to the next step that says, okay, well, there are only 6 things that make us unhappy. So what are the things that I typically find create or lead me to feel angry or anxious? And I'd run through that list. And then I would say, okay, there are only 3 typical ways in which we respond to feeling unhappy because we'd like to restore a sense of satisfaction. Then I would say, well, which pattern are you typically given to? Are you sort of focused on feelings only and mood rescue? Or are you somebody who wants to fix everything? Are you somebody who wants to shy away and move on and avoid everything? Well, where are you at? Are you somebody who can easily accept? So what I'm basically telling you is I would systematically walk them through the mind map and say, let's try and use the structure that's there to give a very, very good insight into who you are. And then you need to decide, is what I've discovered who I want to be? Because you might well find things in there that you're very happy with. And I would say, well, find the freedom to live that out kindly and respectfully amongst other people. And find the areas that you're not happy about or that needed correction because it's just not true. It's not real. And be willing to make those adjustments, improve in other areas. Well, now we're back to sort of goals and achieving that. And what you realize is this whole approach of making sense of me, developing the kind of self-control to follow through with the new decisions that I make, understanding how to pursue a goal with a few good decisions and a lot of the perseverance that depends on the self-control that's rooted in the identity. And then being able to say, you know what, to live my authentic self, I can't be caught in the past. I can't be tripped up by the future, but I need to be grounded in the moment because that is in reality where I am. So physically I'm there. Am I mentally and emotionally there? And that's where the whole perspective for life concept of live now well comes from. So we take all of those things, and there are a couple of other things on the mind map that I would use if I was trying to help a person.
That was DIY, but I'm glad you're in the
Again, once it's there,
you came in somewhere.
right. So again, once it's there,
Some party you met, obviously.
there is a sequence of how I would say establishing who I am and then saying I am sufficiently satisfied to live out who I am without the fear of judgment, without the fear of not meeting whatever the social standards are. I'm content in my own skin with my warts and my whatever I think is great. And I can live freely and consistently in that state. And that is what brings tremendous, tremendous peace of mind, contentment, satisfaction in life. And it actually allows me to be grateful for many things, actually allows me to pursue many things without tremendous fear of risk. It reduces fears. It reduces anxiety. It certainly gives me a sense of hope. So I'm not typically depressed in that state unless I found out I'm completely useless. I'm teasing, obviously. So I think that this kind of thing, if that was somebody's New Year's resolution, let me make sense of me, I think that that's a wonderfully good thing to pursue.
That there is definitely a year to be given. I don't think that's a
I would say the
first
year's
3
the first
weeks.
step. The year's the first step, and then it
It's
continues
an
till we're
ongoing
done.
project, right?
Right, an ongoing project.
But I want to finish on something because we said a layer to build on layers of reality. And knowing that there's a physiological change, this is a female, and I think the reality of this physiological change is something, it's not all in the head. There is a real change of physiology when it comes to women between somewhere entering that fourth decade, fifth decade, and into it. So with perimenopause and menopause, obviously you see
Let's
into
do
a
this. Let's take, and this is what I like
so
about our
just not to
discussions.
discount really that layer
No,
of
no,
reality that
100%,
falls on
which
the
I think it's such a significant part that it
absolutely.
warrants its own video. So what I'm saying is we'll wrap that
Exactly.
one
We're
up and then
gonna
we're going to
join the
digress,
voices, existing
and
voices.
then we'll talk about, how does one sort of deal with, possibly in this case specifically, a change of life that relates to
Because that's a lost
functional
identity as
change.
well there. I mean,
100%.
simply
So let's come back there. Thanks for that. I
thank you.
enjoyed that. Thank you.